Let me go put us live on Facebook. You guys can talk, you know.
Oh.
Don't know what to do. Talk amongst yourselves.
Rebecca,
plans for the weekend?
What's that?
Any plans for the weekend?
It's my wife's birthday today, so we're
Oh.
cooking dinner, and then I'm working this weekend.
Opening up a lot of rosés for her birthday.
Exactly.
No
yeah,
plan.
we have five to enjoy tonight.
What about you?
Too bad it's not hot.
No.
Oh, shush. My air conditioner broke.
Ooh.
Waiting on a new unit. All right, looks like we are live. Get our chat screen up.
I've never done a live one. This is fun. There's so many different little buttons.
Yeah, and we have, wow, we have a bunch of people already on. Look at that. So very cool. Yep, it looks like the Hewitts are joining us again. A few other people. So remember, if you go down to the bottom, you can click the little chat button and it'll pop up the screen, and then it should go over to your right. If it doesn't, minimize your screen a little bit, reopen it, and it'll do it for you. That way then you can see some of the chatting that's happening from people. Let's look over on the other side. Oh, we got a bunch of people over on Facebook joining us too. Cool. Looks like everything's working. You never know. So, all right. We'll give it another minute so people can get on.
Rebecca, where are you right now?
I'm in my office at the winery. You guys will have to come check it out.
The thing is,
That's a cool office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're almost done with the, I mean, we're like 99.99% done. We're just kind of finishing everything up, and then the quarantine happened, and so we just need to button everything up. But yeah, this is looking over the production facility. So like all the tanks are behind us on that side, and then Vineyard's up here.
So, James Bond wear or something with your leather chairs and your fan and all the stainless steel. It's awesome.
Where are you all?
I'm at home.
I went home.
I love your plants. I noticed them yesterday too. I'm like, oh, she has awesome plants.
Well, everything in our house is black or white, so we have to have some kind of life in here, so it's not just like totally sterile.
Got plants. I love plants. Connor makes fun of me because I love houseplants. He's like, I take care of however many vines on the vineyard. I don't want to take care of any more plants.
I have a problem with buying a lot of plants, and then my husband has to keep them alive for me because I buy them and then just kind of forget about them.
I thought, well, that's nice of him. Connor's like, let him die.
All righty. Okay, great. We're up to 30 some people over on the Facebook side of things. We got about 10 or so here. Looks like Steve and Martha Hewitt are joining us again from Columbus, Ohio, I think is where they're from. So thank you again for joining us. There's a few other people. Looks like Michael Higgins is on. Hey, Michael. I haven't talked to you in a little while. Hope you're well. Let's see, Jenny Huss and Lenore Siegler, a bunch of people starting to jump in there.
Is that David Juliette? Can we see? It just says from David.
Just from David, yeah. Don't know, don't have a last name there. All right, well, let's get rolling. So welcome everyone. Chris Toronto again from the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us again on this little kind of Friday diversion, if you will. This fun show. We've got a bunch of rosés that we're going to be tapping into. A really fun panel here of people that I really like their rosé wines. I'm not going to lie. That is why they were basically picked. Of course, if you've noticed, we're trying not to duplicate brands at any and so, believe it or not, we've not used these brands just yet. So that's kind of fun. We've got Tablas Creek, Full Draw Vineyard, and Villa San Juliette. So I'm going to have everybody very quickly go around the room, if you will, and just say a couple quick words about themselves, introduce themselves and their brand, and then we'll pick it back up and I'll get going with our topic. So why don't we start with Chelsea? Chelsea, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Chelsea Franchi. I'm the Senior Assistant Winemaker at Tablas Creek. Tablas Creek is located in Paso Robles, of course, and we're on the west side. We have about 120 acres planted, and we are certified organic and biodynamic for our vineyards. All the wines we produce are done in-house without the use of laboratory yeast. Everything is native ferments. Yeah, and it's primarily Rhone style wines. So we do single varietals and we focus mostly on blends. We have a sister winery in the Châteauneuf-du-Pape region of the Rhone Valley, which is where we brought all of our vine cuttings from. So we actually now have all 13 of the approved Châteauneuf-du-Pape varieties planted here in Paso Robles, which is really exciting.
That's exciting for us. Yeah, we have about, we say 64 different varieties of wine grapes grown in the region. And clearly a bunch of them have brought in through Tablas Creek. So thank you.
Yeah.
Rebecca, Full Draw Vineyard.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca McMahon. So we have Full Draw Vineyard. My husband and I work on it. We have one other person. We're really small. We just started out. Our first vintage was 2016, and we just had our facility open about 2 months ago. So it's really exciting. We are 100 acres on the west side off of Anderson Road. So if you know where Epic's Catapult Vineyard is and where Booker is, we're right in between. 45 of those acres are planted primarily in Rhone varietals, which is what we focus on. We do mostly reds, but we have 2 whites and the rosé, which we're going to talk about today.
Great, thank you. And Dan, last but not least, welcome.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Dan Smith. I'm the winemaker at Villa San Juliette. We're on the east side, on the very northern end of the AVA. So we have 130 acres planted to mostly Bordeaux varieties, but we have 10 reds, 2 whites, and then we pull our rosé from our Grenache variety. So excited for to chat with all you guys today, and we have some beautiful wines here. So excited to go through them.
Cool. And real quick, I'm going to orient people on where everybody is. And so if you're following my cursor, Adelaida District, kind of out here is where you'll find Tablas Creek. And then in the Willow Creek District, kind of right over here, over by the E's, you're going to find the Full Draw. And then over here in the Estrella District, kind of out by the E of Chalam, or maybe even the S a little closer, is where you're going to find Villa San Juliette. So definitely really different parts of our AVA are being represented by these wines today, and of course different styles. We're talking about rosé wines today. There's basically about 3 major ways that you can make rosé wines. That skin contact maceration, often called direct press way. There's Saignée, where you're bleeding it off. And so it's kind of almost like not a byproduct, but a secondary wine made from a red wine that's being made. And then there's blending. We have 2 of the 3, and then also variations within the 2 represented today by these wines. I'll put them up on the screen in just a second. I know Tablas, of course, I mean, they make so many wines, but they make 2 rosé wines. And so and they're both done in different styles. And so I thought I would start with Chelsea to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll kind of get going in conversation to bring it around to everybody else to talk about their wines as well and have a conversation and hang out. So Chelsea, why don't you kick us off a little bit?
Okay. So the two rosés that we do, like Chris said, they're both done in very different fashions. So we have one that's made a little bit more of that Provence style, which is going to be direct press and based on Grenache. So that one's Patelon. So the one that we brought is the 2019 Patelon. It's always based on Grenache, and we blend in Mourvedre and Counoise. With this, direct press basically means that we are bringing this fruit in specifically for the production of rosé. So this fruit isn't going to be used for anything else. We pick based on members where we want these rosés. So we really try to pick this so that we have an alcohol of less than, 13.5, around that 13%. Because we want this to be kind of an easy drinking, like it can be a nice little picnic rosé. But also when you pick for those alcohol levels, that means you're picking lower sugar, higher acidity. So we want something a little bit more fresh, a little bit more vibrant. And you'll notice, the color on this Patelon Rosé is so pale. So with direct press, it means we pick the fruit, it comes into our cellar, we put it directly into our press. And I'm not sure, I don't have a great, oh, Chris, we've got disabled screen sharing.
Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. There you go.
Okay, so let me see if I can. So this is what it looks like once we direct press. That's basically the press pan after it's gone through the press cycle. So, it's not exactly pretty, but it will be eventually. So it goes through the press cycle. So you saw those slotted screens on the bottom of that press. So the juice just trickles right through that into the press pan. The time that the fruit, the juice stays on the skins is about 2.5 hours. That's the duration of our press cycle. So this wine in 2019 was about 85% direct press, and then a tiny bit of that Saignée, but the Saignée was only a couple hours. So we brought the fruit in, and I was basically pulling Saignée as the fruit was still being pumped into the tank. With that, we get a little bit more delicacy. So you get a little bit more of that kind of grapefruit pith and just kind of that bright, energetic vibrancy. It does have a little bit of that rose petal characteristic to it. So we're just trying to keep this really soft, really gentle, just something that's fun to drink, essentially.
I would say that it's pretty fun, and it's really light. It's really delicate. It's definitely, like you were saying, kind of like that picnic wine where you could definitely find yourself slugging this back a little bit. So
right.
but it's such
okay.
yeah. But with the alcohol level and everything, it's pretty low, and so it's like you might not feel so bad actually doing it.
That's the whole point.
Rebecca, you were saying that yours is free run. I'd love to get to talking a little bit about your wine. I'll put it in front here. There's the beautiful front label.
Yeah, so the rosé it actually started off on accident. So it was a gift for weddings, for a couple of friends for weddings. And we had someone ask how much it was at the wedding. And I was like, I don't know, it doesn't even have a label on it. And so we ended up slapping a label on it. Each of our labels for all of our wine it's an actual piece of artwork. So this actually hangs above our living room, above our fireplace. And so, so technically speaking, Connor's the winemaker for Full Draw, and we did that by design. I love being a part of a team, but we also really wanted to stay married. So I got to make the rosé, and he got to make everything else. But we blend everything together. And so the rosé is a really fun project for me. I went to UC Davis and I studied viticulture and enology there. And I kind of do more of the back end of this. So this is kind of just a really fun thing for me to do every year. So we take free run, it stays on the skins for about 24 hours. I specifically know which blocks I like to take it from. This year we played with a little bit of Syrah in it as well. And I really like kind of the difference that it gave to it. It gives it a little bit different mouthfeel and a little bit different aromatics than we have in the past. We've done just Grenache and Morvet in the past, and the Syrah was kind of fun to add in there. It's only 20%. And then I fermented in neutral barrels. I really, really like the mouthfeel that it gives. It gives it a little bit rounder of a mouthfeel. And though the color is a little bit darker for a rosé, it's actually really, really fresh. We keep acid really, really well in our vineyard. It's covered in white rocks. Some of the blocks that I take from, we kind of call them moon blocks just because there is so little organic matter in there. So we pick at, our finishing pH is about 3.6. So the acid is really long and nice. But it still has that good mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It's got a really cool spiciness to it too. I don't know if that's the Syrah component, but
I agree with you. I think it's the Syrah that it kind of, I get the Morvet and the Grenache on the front palate, but then it added something a little bit different to the finish with the Syrah. And we made it not knowing if we were going to use it, but we added it in there and we thought, oh, that's kind of fun. So
it's beautiful. It's like really full and rich and plush, but it does have that like racy acidity, like that vein just running through it. And then wrapping it up with kind of that spicy bite on the back end. Like this is something, like I want to barbecue with this right now.
thank you.
I want it to be like warm and gorgeous and sitting outside.
And you want, I mean, you want to drink, like you said, I mean, our alcohol is a little bit higher, but it's like I think it's 14.1 on this one, but you want to be able to drink, I don't know, you want it to taste really good. You want to drink the whole bottle, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe that's just.
Well, and there's a nice, just slight tannin to it that's almost velvety. So mixed with that fresh acid and great flavor, it's just this glides over the palate. So really nice.
Thank you guys.
So typically in a lot of rosés, you're either going to find them to be fruity, and then maybe they're lean or floral, or they have, you know, some delicate qualities to them. Oftentimes you'll have them be a little savory, right? And with kind of a more rich, or maybe even like a little bit more of a visceral, or not visceral, I'm sorry, a viscous mouthfeel. And then they're sweet.
There's something for everybody. You don't have to.
There's a, yeah, whoops.
No judgment.
You're so kind.
Definitely we're looking at the fruity and the savory, and this one is savory for sure. This is definitely one of those food wines, right? Dan, let's get to your first wine, and then we'll kind of help bring it back around to back over to Chelsea, and then definitely want to talk more about then the winemaking itself. I have a few questions about that.
Sure. So I have two rosés today. I have 2018 and 2019 vintage. They're both 100% Grenache. So Chris is holding up the 2018 right now, and there's the 2019. And I think the reason I pulled these two side by side today is what's different about ours is we're going direct press that we're growing specifically for rosé. But because our Grenache is so light on its own, it's one of our lightest reds on the vineyard. It can take some skin contact. So I'm actually bringing fruit in and destemming it like a red wine to tank for about a 2 to 3 day cold soak. And so the difference that you see between the color is actually 1 day difference of cold soak. 2019 also had a little bit smaller crops, a little bit more concentration, but similar to Chelsea, we're picking this around 23 and a half, trying to target kind of alcohol in the low 13s. So more of that Provence style, but we used to make a lot of different styles of rosé. We did Saunier with mixed direct to press, barrel ferment, and I just found Grenache was the one to kind of hone in on. So yeah, it's a really fun wine to make. It's honestly probably the trickiest maneuvers of the harvest. It's just myself and our assistant winemaker, Mike. So by the time everybody's drained and pressed finished red wine, when you try to drain and press a full tank of juice and must in a smaller winery atmosphere, it's pretty sketchy. So we have to spend a little bit more time in the morning getting ready, and then it's constant dry ice. And then during that cold soak, we're constantly hitting it with some CO2 so we don't oxidize the juice. But what happens is by the time that it goes to press, we have this really, really dark color. And then because we don't have as much tannin in our Grenache, a lot of that color will drop out. So I had a friend come and check it out one year, and he said, he's like, dang, this is gonna be a really, really dark rosé. And right after fermentation, that color just kind of melded to a really nice soft pink. So that was the 2018 vintage. I actually have a little video clip of our press pan right after the 3 day cold soak from 2019, if you guys want to check it out.
Sure.
They're so prepared. I love all these pictures. I'm not.
So here's a little video. Oops.
Cool. Looks like bubble gum.
Mm.
Yeah. It's the Willy Wonka of rosé.
And how long did you say that was on the skins for?
So that was a 3 day cold soak, and we got that tank as cold as possible. I don't know how to get back to.
Go to the top and then you stop share.
Oh yeah, sorry guys, I'm a noob. Yeah, so yeah, that's a 3-day cold soak, and on the 4th day, we separated that out and basically dug it into a must pump and pumped it to press, and then just was constantly blasting it with some dry ice just to make sure that we protected that color. And then once it got to tank, we do a really cold fermentation. I try to do low 50s just so we're moving at a really slow pace and maintain aromatics, but we might jump into that part, Chris, a little bit later as the winemaking styles go. But yeah, in a nutshell, so
Dan,
I am definitely curious about once you guys go into tank for fermentation, and then for any, if you're doing any form of aging at all, or like kind of when you go to bottling. Love to talk about that here in a second. But before we get there, if we can go to Chelsea's second wine and then have a bit of a round robin on this one, that would be great.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do we talk about your second rosé? We just talked about.
Yeah, that's where we're going.
Okay.
Is this one? Yeah.
okay, so the dianthus that we produce, dianthus, by the way, is a family of pink flower. So when we started making the Patalon Rosé in 2012, we thought we would have some differentiation between the rosé and the Patalon Rosé. So we renamed this Dianthus. And Dianthus is essentially, it's all Saunier and it's 100% estate. So with this wine, I heard once that the president of the Provence Wine Council called Saunier winemakers opportunists. And it was kind of like not a really nice thing for him to say. But I truly believe that, I mean, because we are making this Saunier Rosé, these wines are slated to be red wines. So they're processed the way we would if we were making a red. So they go through the sorter, they go through the stemmer, they go into tank. And then depending on variety, depending on vintage too, like there are some vintages where it takes a little bit longer for things to color up. 17 and 19, I noticed things colored up a lot faster than they were in other vintages. And it's always kind of an interesting marker during harvest. When you see how fast things are taking on that color, you can kind of tell like, oh, okay, this is going to be a strong vintage for reds. So that's always kind of like a mid
Color.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's always kind of a good mid-harvest marker of, quality and intensity for me at least. But with these wines, essentially, I'm earmarking blocks before they hit the cellar. So this is always going to be based on Mourvedre, and we blend in Grenache and Counoise. But these are typically blocks that will end up eventually going into our upper echelon wines. So our Esprit and our Panoply in particular. We'll usually pull about a 20 to 23% Saunier on these blocks. And it's really cool because everything that we do at Tablas Creek is completely kept separate. So it's harvested separately, it's fermented separately, it's aged separately. The rosés are one of the few things that we do this kind of cool rolling ferment on. So especially Dianthus, like Dianthus spans basically the entirety of harvest. So we'll kick it off at the beginning of harvest with Grenache, get a couple of those lots in the tank, get them fermenting. And then later on in the season, as we start getting in those Mourvedre lots, as we start bringing in that last of the Counoise. So you basically have this rolling ferment where it starts off with the sugar up here, and then it drops down as that fermentation continues, and then you add in more juice and it drops down and you add in more juice. So you have like this really beautiful, lengthy ferment. So it adds this complexity and this depth that I think that we wouldn't normally get if we just put everything in tank all at once and just let it ferment and do its thing. Like what Dan said, we typically ferment anywhere from 55 to 57 degrees. So we do try to keep it as long and extended as possible. Yeah, so with this, we're looking for something with a little bit more structure. And because it is from our highest quality blocks, we do get that. So this is made more to be not quite that picnic wine style like we had with the Patalon, but this is something that we would definitely recommend enjoying with food. It does have a little bit more oomph to it. It has a lot more body, but it has the acidity to back it up. So it's something that, I think is definitely really, it shines with food, I think.
I have to say, so we typically ferment, like you said, we keep everything separately. And I think there's something really special about Mourvedre based rosés. I love the aromatics that you get from them. And I have to say, same thing with this. I love the Mourvedre base, and I love how your finish, like you said, it's really long and lengthy, but it does have a lot of complexity on the front end.
Thank you.
It does, for sure.
Really nice.
I wanted to have them side by side, meaning the 19 Villa San Juliette Rosé with a 19 Dianthus. Granted, they are obviously different altogether fruit in their base, they're the majority base, but the color was so close. I couldn't believe it as I was looking at it in bottle. And it's so funny if you were to truly taste these blind, man, you pick out that Mourvedre and you pick out that Grenache real easily, right?
Definitely. Dan's is so juicy, and it just has this explosive character right off the front.
I love how floral it is too. Like whatever the 19 is, sorry. I think it was the 19. This one, the really vibrant color.
Yeah.
There's something that for me pops right out of the glass. It's very, very floral, but not in a bad way. Because sometimes I feel like when you smell floral, like you said, Chris, before about sweet wines, sometimes I feel like you smell like this interesting kind of almost not good sweetness. But this for me is, I can't quite pick the flower out, and I'm trying to, but it's very floral, and I really like the aromatics on it.
Thank you. I get like a really strong like watermelon characteristic too.
Yeah.
It's like intense stone fruit compared to the 18, which is a little bit more of that light, a little slightly underripe summer fruit note. So yeah, this is just literally playing around with a few different pick times and a couple different crop sizes. Usually our rosé and Grenache will push about 6 tons per acre, which is on the high side. And so that was 2018. So a lot less, or a lot more surface area. And then 2019, we hit, I think 3 tons per acre just from that harvest. So there's a lot of different factors that are going to play into the color, but it also has a big effect on the flavor development too. And so I think it's trying to understand how you push flavors in different ways and how you targeted it in. I think the 19 actually went a little bit further than I meant it to be, but at a certain point you just, that's what it's going to be, so trying to make a balanced wine there. But rosé is such an evolving thing, and I'm glad we're all taking it really seriously, because it's seriously one of the most fun wines to make. And it's not necessarily easy either, especially if you're doing saignée or a mix of direct to press or direct to press, so bravo on all these wines so far.
I would like to say, we talk about this a lot in our cellar, but people talk about rosé as just being kind of like a simple, fun drinking wine, but it is one of the more labor-intensive wines that we have that comes through our cellar. My mornings during harvest are spent pulling saignée on everything that came in the 2 days prior, and checking numbers, checking aromatics, checking flavors on the things that came in one day before, just to make sure, because there are some blocks, Mourvedre in particular will color up a little bit quicker. Counoise you can typically leave in there for 3 days, and that's no issue. If you leave Mourvedre in the tank a little bit too long, you've missed your window. So it's, this constant process every single day of, there are some lots that we're pulling, 20, 30 gallons out of the tank, and some lots that you're pulling 200 gallons out of the tank. It totally depends. And actually I have some pictures of what saignée looks like. So, oops, maybe not.
That's a full press brand.
It is.
I'd be nervous.
Don't be scared. It's okay.
Walk away for a second though.
So that's what the sorting table is going to look like. So when we're going through all of these,
we're still seeing the press pan.
Oh, let's see.
You might have to go and select the different.
There we go. How's that?
There you go.
Okay, so This is the sorting table, and that's what it's going to look like as the fruit's being processed. And then it's going to end up
bright green stems of Grenache there, that almost day glow. That is what that is, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then once it goes into tank, so this is one of our wooden oak foudres here. So once it goes into tank and it's been in there for the number of days that we deem appropriate, that's when we bleed the juice off. So the word saignée in French means to bleed. So we're literally just bleeding this juice from the tank. And that's what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, what's left in the tank, we've now altered that ratio of juice to skins. So what's left in the tank that's left to ferment as a red now has a lot more body, it has a lot more structure, it has a lot more tannin, because there's not as much juice, but there's still just as much solids. So with those, we typically end up taking those into the higher end blends later during the blending season.
I have a question. So what do you guys ferment in? Do you ferment in stainless, or do you ferment in the foudres, or what was your fermentation vessel?
So for the individual lots that we're pulling saignée from, it's across the board. It can be stainless steel, it can be oak, it's whatever that went into. And that means it can be a closed stainless steel vessel, it can be an open top stainless tank. But then once we start that rosé process, that'll go 100% into stainless steel.
Okay.
So that's both for Patillon and for Dianthus. We have really great temperature control on those, so we can really kind of zero in on that exact temp that we want. And plus for us, yours is so beautiful and so plush, and I think you do pick up a lot of that kind of oak softening, but I don't think really have the space to be able to ferment, especially, I don't think Patillon would do as well in oak because it is so soft and so delicate. But Dianthus, we don't really have the space available to do that because it's taken up with.
Well, yeah, and then you have to stir them, so they have to be on the ground. I
Yeah, don't overfill those barrels for rosé.
Yeah.
They're happy. They're naturally happy with nutrients, so we can go crazy.
Yeah, we just keep ours in the barrel room and kind of let them do their thing. And there's a couple times I've come in and it's just billowing over, and you're like, ah, because there's nothing to really do about it.
And have you guys played with any other form of vessels just to experiment, just to see oh, well, let's try this anyway, just to see if it might do anything different?
I've done a little bit in concrete, and we also early on were doing barrel ferments as well. And I think anytime we might pull saignée, we're always experimenting to see if we can pull it off. But yeah, the concrete was interesting. We have these cones, and it's similar to the egg. They kind of just keep the lees stirring, the nutrients stirring throughout the fermentation. But it tasted weird. I think one of the nice things about stainless steel is it's really going to showcase the beauty of the fruit that you're working with, especially if you're treating it in cool temperature. And so yeah, I'm kind of done experimenting with rosé. You get it into stainless steel, you can control the temp. And for me, we're using a commercial yeast that I've kind of played around with a couple different versions, some white yeast. I actually have a yeast specific for rosé production. And so it just really pushes some of those floral qualities. And yeah, kind of tried and true at this point. I'm getting set in my ways already. So
Sorry, Chelsea, maybe you froze just there.
Oh, I think it just froze.
Oh,
Chelsea's frozen.
Not a bad freeze, though. Some freezes are really bad, but you can still look good.
When you're like, there's a question for you, Rebecca, about how full draw has evolved, and if you can read that.
Yeah, I saw that message. So, hi, Hewitts. Hi, Steve. Nice to meet you. So about that, so Connor was the assistant vigneron at Booker for 6 years. That's where he started out. So He came in 2011. That was his first vintage, and he just wanted to learn how to make wine because he wanted to sell wine better. And then he really fell in love with the area. And halfway through harvest, Eric asked him to be the assistant there. And then in February of 2012, the property next door came up for sale. So he bought that. And then basically Booker bought fruit from us, and they did a full draw vineyard designate. And then they stopped buying fruit just this past year. So full draw has always been its own entity, but we just sold fruit to Booker, and they did a really wonderful job with the fruit that they bought from us. And it's really fun to be able to see it. And then so Connor broke off in 2016. He made his first vintage actually at Booker. And then in 2017, we've been doing full draw on our own. So it's actually really funny. I can look out and I see the big Booker block. So it's nice. We love having good neighbors.
Yeah, that's a great little spot. I wonder what that's like though right now for the construction with the caves and everything.
Yeah, it's really dusty, but we were just under construction too. So, I mean, it's always dusty here. They're beautiful though. So if you guys go see them, yeah. It is a huge, the caves are honestly awe-inspiring. Any cave that you go in there's something about the smell in them, I think, that I love.
Yeah. Chelsea, if you can hear us, you might want to back out and come back in again because you're frozen. So that would help you out. So I see her box lighting up and then.
Yeah, I can see it light. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, you're just frozen.
Oh. Well, I'll see you soon.
Come back in.
Yeah.
It should free, or just stop video and then start video again. That will probably work. How about different varieties? We're all looking at some Grenache here, and then of course we've got like Syrah and a couple other the Rhone varieties. Mourvedre, of course, mentioned as the primary for the Dianthus. But what other varieties are you playing with? Oftentimes you're looking at Tempranillo or Sangiovese that are those maybe typical rosé making red wine grapes. But have you guys played with anything else?
Yeah, Chris, you're familiar with our red quorum blend. It's just the hodgepodge of all of our 10 red varieties. And so we have played with a lot of rosé versions of that to maybe try to make a quorum pink.
Oh.
And we haven't quite worked out all those varieties, but we've done a lot with Petite Syrah and Zinfandel. And Chelsea's back.
Yeah, there's two of me. Oh, okay.
There you go.
You moved
Right.
boxes, crazy bunch. So Petite Syrah actually makes really, really, really beautiful rosé. But it stylistically, to make it on its own would be a little intense. Zinfandel, not as intense, but just kind of more spice components too. So, it really boils down to balance and what you're trying to convey. And for us, we were trying to just make a fruit-forward, fruity wine that blended well to drinking in the summer and the heat. And Grenache kind of just worked its way out as always being the best lot every vintage. And so that's why I went 100% with it.
Yeah. We have a quick question about what we're drinking. Somebody got in late. I'll do a quick share screen here of all of the wines. And so, yeah, one of my kids was involved in the photo shoot today. So the 19 Patelin de Tablas Rosé, the 19 Dianthus. Patelin is a Grenache-based, Dianthus Mourvedre. We've got the Grenache-based full draw wine there in the middle. And then two Grenaches of different vintages from the Villa San Juliette, the 18 and the 19. Oh, here we go.
And I do love how many of these rosés are that deep plush pink. I mean, this isn't something that you typically see with rosés, and we kind of have to walk the line, especially with the Patelin, of not being too light. But it's so cool to see things like that color, that the market is excited about. And it's
Mhm.
definitely kind of splitting that wine or that line, excuse me, between a white or a red. Especially yours, Becca. I mean, yours is like, you can close your eyes and it has that juiciness of Gamay, but it also has that like lean, bright, you know, energy of a white. Yeah.
Honestly, that's kind of what we're trying to go for. I mean, it's, and I, don't get me wrong, I like rosé. There's always, for me, there's always a certain circumstance where I like a more Provençal style, I want a more Provençal style of rosé. And then there's also a time when I want one that has a little bit more complexity to it. But one comment that I always get on it, which I find funny, is a lot of times people are like, well, I don't like rosé. But this, like you said, it kind of almost like, if you close your eyes, it almost is like a white wine. I think it's from the barrel ferment and that roundness, and like you were talking to, I think it'd be fun to play with concrete, but both concrete and fermenting in barrel, for me, you just get that kind of plushness, which is, I don't know, different. And like you said, I want to line them all up. We have such a good array of colors going on over here.
Yeah.
Dan, I
How
wanted
cold? Oh, go
I
ahead.
wanted to talk to you about, I mean, I know they're completely different vintages, so you're going to get, you know, a lot of that vintage variation, but
Sure.
was there conscientious decision of why to leave it on for 2 days rather than 3, or was it a timing thing because it's harvest and it's just?
No, I honestly, I think so. So Grenache, we usually pick this for red wine middle of October, and for previous vintages, we were picking the Grenache about 3 weeks earlier from the red grapes, and for whatever reason, we just weren't really maturing in sugars in 2019. So as far as the skin contact, you know, we saw the 18, and this was really the first year we did that skin contact. 17 was all Grenache, but it actually ended up similar to your, I can't pronounce it, the
Petalon.
Patseno.
Go French if you
This is what our Grenache would look like if we went just direct to press.
Right.
And for us, it was turning out a little orangey, which is beautiful in its own way, but I just really wanted to hone in on those beautiful pink colors that Grenache can provide. So that's where we went to the, like, let's cold soak it and let's see where it goes. So a lot of it from 19 was experimental. Like, do we pull it out today, or should we wait another day? And as you know, with juice, there's susceptibilities, especially if you're going to then aerate it by removing it back into press. So we, you know, kept the temperature really cold. We bumped up the sulfur a little bit, and we just had this history of the color falling all out during fermentation. So when we tasted on the second day, similar to 18, we just like, well, it's good. We could do it today, but let's push it another day. I think it'll be fine. So we ended up with a little bit darker version, which ended up being this kind of really vibrant pink hue. And I think that will age well too as some color drops out. So yeah, a little bit of both. I think timing wise, we didn't have any fruit coming in that week, so our full concentration was on that rosé.
I don't know what your secret is. So this is the 19, and this is like, so during harvest, when things are fermenting, and, you know, like shortly after harvest, when they're still going through primary and a little bit of secondary, you get this rosé glow, and it's like there is this light within the glass, and you have managed to maintain the glow. And I don't know how you did that, because like when we hit it with SO2 and bottle it, we lose it.
I don't either, because to your last point, once you sulfur those wines, you lose that harvest glow. And so, and we did for a little bit, but, you know, we filtered a week before bottling. And also, I didn't really mention this, but all of our rosés are going to neutral French oak for about 4 or 5 months. Actually, in the case of 19, it was just a few months, but, you know, that helps set it. And then we're also stirring those lees on a weekly basis, just to try to create some creaminess. I did step back a little bit on the acid in 19, but yeah, I can't pinpoint what kept that glow in the 19. I will say, just from sulfur additions and stuff, it was a little bleached, and really just popped back. We released this wine in March, right before the COVID closures, and it's even just, it's kind of maintained this really pretty feel to it. So especially when it gets chilled down, I think on the shelf it's pretty, but once it's cold, then it's kind of this frost around it.
If you don't want to share your secrets on Zoom Live, I totally get it. We'll just connect later.
Yeah, no, I wish I'm transparent, but I don't really know what kept that one good. I actually had a question for you, Chelsea. So does your Saunier lots change percentage-wise on what you're going to pull from your reds? And have you seen that affect the flavor development of that particular dianthus?
It does change pretty dramatically from year to year. The blend, I would say, sticks somewhat close to what you're seeing in this bottle. Basically, because that's what we're looking at, like I plan before harvest, kind of thinking if you estimate this many tons per acre for Mourvedre, this many tons per acre for Grenache, this many tons per acre for Counoise, and then kind of, like I said, picking out those highest quality lots and kind of trying to figure out how much juice can I take from each of these. So that's kind of the driving factor, because it's difficult. It's not like our regular blending where you sit down and you're tasting everything blind and you're basically just saying, what's the best thing that we can make from all of the things that we have available to us? Like, this planning is done before harvest, because I need to know approximately how much we want to make, and I want to make sure that it's always Mourvedre driven. So I do need to know how much of Mourvedre I need to get, and then Grenache and Counoise will kind of follow more organically. But from year to year, like I said, it's basically a vintage choice. So there are some years where I'll leave the juice on the skins for 1 day. There are some years where that same exact block I'll leave it on for 3 days. And every day it's just, like I said, smelling that juice, tasting that juice, and kind of trying to pinpoint that exact moment where it's okay, it's go time. Let's pull this Saunier. So it does change a lot from year to year, but it's always going to have that like super ripe summer strawberry characteristic. I don't know. It's funny because I think with our wine club members too, from vintage to vintage, they'll kind of flip flop. Like 1 year they'll prefer the dianthus, and the next year we'll get a whole flood of people saying like, no, Patillon's my choice this year, and then the next year it'll go back to dianthus. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what we're given that year.
Definitely. And sorry to keep pounding you on this, but what about the opposite? How do you find that? Do you see differences on the red wines that you're making, that you're pulling for rosé, based on that decision timing? And what were those? Are those reds intended for a certain quality of wine? And how do you figure out that balance between your rosé program for dianthus and red wine quality for the reserves? Yeah.
So with that decision of knowing these are the blocks these are the lots that we brought in that did get that 20% Saunier pulled, when we sit down and do our blind tasting for our blending, we know which ones had Saunier pulled, and we'll kind of make note of it after the fact. So as we're looking through later in the year, like, oh, okay, so all of these went into a spree and all of them had Saunier pulled. And just kind of keeping records and knowing, what we pulled. As far as how long that Saunier sat on, I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue for us, because typically we'll do a couple day cold soak because we're native yeast. So for us, things don't just naturally kick off the second they come in the cellar. So we get kind of the benefit of kind of this natural cold soak where the fruit is picked at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's brought into the cellar really, really cold. It goes into temperature controlled tanks. So that difference between 1 or 3 days over a 2-week long maceration time that's not really something that we were able to notice a difference of, to be honest.
Sure. Thank you.
A quick question about temperature. So you mentioned if it's served colder versus maybe a little bit more of that room temp or something like that. But I'm finding I did not totally chill down all of these wines. I gave them a light chill and then tapped into them just because I felt like the aromatics were definitely going to stand out far more, all of that. But do you have, for your wines in particular, recommended temperatures that they should be served at? I feel like that maybe the more viscous, deeper ones should probably be closer to room temp versus maybe the lighter ones. And talk about that if you can and enlighten our audience a little bit.
So for us, I think, you know, there is a delicate balance, especially for the dianthus. It is a richer, deeper rosé. And you want to make sure that it's cold enough to kind of keep those ethanols at bay, because you don't want it to be, you know, really, really warm, like room temperature or warmer, because I think you will get a little bit more alcohol than you would those beautiful aromatics. Where the Patelin, I think, is, I mean, it's straight out of the fridge, super, super pretty. You know, it's got that lean brightness. A little bit more of that minerality is going to showcase itself a little bit more the colder it is. But I don't know, I think, because all of these I pulled out of the fridge, they were in the fridge since yesterday, and tasting them before we started this program, and now tasting them, you know, maybe an hour later, I mean, they've completely evolved, they've completely opened up. So it's a totally different experience tasting this flight of wines as opposed to what they were an hour ago. And it's great because all of them are showing beautifully, but in a completely different manner. So it's.
Rebecca, what do you like your wine to be served at? Do you have it? Is there a temp in your mind?
Well, I mentioned it before, I think it depends on occasion, and I think it's really a personal preference too. I mean, for me, I like my, if I want to get tense, right? If it's 102, I might throw an ice cube in my rosé. You guys can laugh at me if you want. But honestly, I mean, if it's ice cold and it's 102 degrees outside, you want something really, really cold, and you're gonna get, I mean, you still, I've had this always, I mean, and it'll taste really good. You won't get some of the beautiful aromatics, but you're still gonna get that mouthfeel and that acidity and that, but then if you're tasting it now, which I didn't chill mine either. Mine just came right out of the wine fridge and they weren't even in there for that long. I think they were in for since this morning. So they weren't super cold, but you get a lot of different aromatics. Your mouthfeel is going to be different. So, I mean, I know people that like their white wine room temperature, which for me, I like it a little chilled. I like to have a little bit of coolness on it, but I don't know. I would say just in the fridge or pop it in the freezer for 20 or 30 minutes is how I like to drink this one. But like I said, if it's 102, I'm not going to judge you if you put an ice cube in it.
Totally personal preference for sure. Yeah. And definitely it feels like if you're looking for those aromatics and everything, maybe if it is getting a little warmer, a light chill. Otherwise, if it's super chilled down, man, I think it's almost like an ice cold beer. You just kind of slug it back.
Yeah, it's a little muted.
Yeah. We're getting along in time here. We're already at 50 after the hour, and we usually try to wrap things up by now. I wanted to give you all a quick chance, though, if you wanted to do it. Do you have a virtual tasting? Anybody have something like that coming up that you want to talk about? No? All right.
So I'll go. I had kind of a fun little thing. So we do tastings from home. So I send you can check it out on our website. You just click on the wine link at the top and then go to tasting. And so you can do a full draw tasting experience at home. I've had a lot of success doing that. We've had a lot of fun with people. You can do it with your friends, or we can hop on Zoom with you. But you get to try the whole lineup from the comfort of your own home. And I think that's kind of a fun thing. We're gonna stick with it even when COVID is all over and done with. It's just a fun new way of tasting wines, and you get to do it, like I said, in your comfortability, or you can get a group together. And so that's something that we've had a lot of fun and success with throughout this whole COVID experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Tablas Creek is doing virtual tastings also, and you can choose your own wines, kind of a choose your own adventure kind of thing, or we have tasting packs that we'll send to you. I actually saw on our calendar that they're doing a Bachelorette Tasting. So it's a socially distanced Bachelorette party, and everybody had the shipments sent to them, and they're all going to meet up on Zoom and taste together. And then we also do, our executive winemaker, Neil Collins, does a Facebook Live, typically every Friday, but he's taking this week off. And our general manager, Jason, does interviews every Wednesday afternoon with different people in the wine industry that are really, really cool. So.
Right on. Very cool. Dan, what do you got going? Anything?
Yeah, so we actually have a licensed kitchen. So we were able to open up last weekend for wine service and food. As long as you're ordering a food item, we can do a little tasting for you. And so we've been working hard to get safety precautions in place. We have an outside patio that's great and spaced out really nicely. And so we opened last weekend by appointment, and we're continuing that going forward. So come out into VSJ, just call us ahead of time, visit our website. There's a tasting appointment module, and yeah, you can taste through a kind of a more condensed flight than you normally would. But yeah, it's been an interesting process. We're excited to start opening slowly.
Yeah, and we're getting there actually. We're hearing that maybe by next week, there very well could be an announcement about an actual firm date of reopening for tastings as well. Of course, there's going to be a lot of protocols. There's a lot of things that our wineries have to do in order to greet you and have you taste with them here in this kind of new world that we're basically living. But it will be safe. Everybody will have the same standards that they're all going to be living up to, and so we'll be just the same Paso, just maybe a few fewer people and a little bit more spaced out. But all of those protocols and the like will be available eventually for everyone that are coming to the region to be able to see, so they know and we can manage their expectations. And then all of the wineries, of course, will have things posted and all that good stuff. So as we get closer to a point in time that we can make an announcement, we will. But we're just monitoring everything coming from the governor's office and from Wine Institute. So we'll see where we go from here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you very much, Rebecca, Dan, and Chelsea. Really appreciate you spending a little time and sharing your wines. Go to their websites. It's folgravvineyard.com, tablascreek.com, and villasanjuliette.com or Vineyard.
villasanjuliette.com.
Okay, great. So go to their websites. You can see some of those tastings. You can book a lunch appointment over there at Villa San Juliette, and you can see all of their offerings and maybe get your hands on some of these wines. Next week, we are switching to a Thursday only show series. So instead of doing Wednesdays and Fridays, we are going to just be Thursdays only. Next week's shows are going to be all about music and the musicality of wine. We'll have some really fun guests for that one. Check it out on pasowine.com. So right on. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Bye. Thanks, Chris. Bye, Becca. Bye, Dan.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone. See ya.
Cheers.
All right, right on. Bye.
See you guys soon.